I see more and more people are joining us this morning. So I've allowed everyone to unmute if you want to share where you're from, where you're listening. How?
Share your video.
Yeah, share your video. We're trying to be more interactive because I'm pretty sure everyone's having like the virtual meeting fatigue. Okay, it looks like it's 11 o'clock. I'm gonna start all the intro while we wait for more. Good morning, everyone. I'm Edessa Paulzine. I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager at WebCourseWorks, and thank you for joining us for this morning's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to direct your attention. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A and Q&A button and a chat button. So if you want to ask questions during the presentation, feel free to chime in and send in your questions or chat with us. I'll be monitoring the chat and the questions, so we'll make sure we'll get to your questions. And if you're having any audio issues, difficulties, let us know through that chat box as well, and we'll try to resolve the issue. Let's see, we have about 50 people. Yep, 15. Cool. Oh, I see a question already. Oh, there's no chat. Okay, let's see.
So hi, everybody. I'm John Alexson, and I'm pleased to have you here today. We're going to leave the audio and video on in case you want to join us. When you do talk, your image will go on the screen, or of course, if you want to keep your camera off, that's fine. I just ask that while I'm presenting, if you could mute, that's great. But if you do have a question and you want to pop in, let's make this as interactive as possible. And as Edessa said, feel free to introduce yourself. I'm gonna just for the next few minutes, I'll keep the line open here for you to say where you're from.
Hi, folks. I'm Brenda Napolitano. I'm from New Orleans.
Hey, Brenda.
Good afternoon. I'm Emily O'Connor. I am the Continuing Education Program Manager with the Wound, Ostomy, and Continence Nurses Society, and I live in Washington, D.C.
Welcome, Emily.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Erica Clements. I'm from the Association for Molecular Pathology, and I am the Senior Manager in the Educational Programs.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Becca Orr. I am based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and I work at the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery as the Education Supervisor.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for joining us this morning.
I guess I should say, it's Brenda. I should say that I am a video producer and I do CMEs for a medical malpractice insurance company. So I'm not an educator per se or a subject matter expert unless the subject is video production.
Good to know. Okay, let's see.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Ash Shepard. I'm a Chief Program Officer at NTEN. We're a nonprofit and we do capacity building for other nonprofits. We do that through a variety of online and in-person training. So we work with a lot of external community members to be our faculty on courses, stuff like that.
Hey, Ash, thanks for joining us. Anybody else? We'll give it a few more seconds.
Hi guys, this is Dana Varble. I am a veterinarian and I'm the Chief Veterinary Officer at North American Veterinary Community. So I wanted to jump on this because I'm not technically a healthcare associate, but certainly in a related field.
Thank you. Okay, let's get started here. I want to make a few comments in general about the period that we're going through and just kind of focus on some of the positives as I see it. I've been very excited about what groups are doing in the virtual space. And I'm really hoping that once we get through this period, that some of the things that we're doing, really enhances what we're going to do in the future. Just to name a few, if any of you were at the ASAE virtual annual meeting, there were some really nice interchanges in the chat box during people's recorded presentations. Now I'm live and you're live, which is great. But of course, when you have, 60 sessions that you're doing, you've got to do some recording. So, but there was still a lot of good interactivity. As a speaker, I was also on the chat. So really excited about that. We've seen through the years a lack of wanting to use video, even in meetings. I mean, I've said to my people for collaboration purposes, let's use video. It's better for collaboration, and people just were not keen on it. And of course, now we've got Zoom fatigue, and people have experienced this big time. But again, I hope that people are comfortable. They'll have the equipment. There's a comfort factor in meeting virtually, and then meeting, using your video image, so people can, read your expressions better and such. So I think that's a real plus for collaboration, which is really what this session's about. Other things I'm hoping will transfer after this period is the extra effort that groups are taking to increase production values. The art, what you've got is this combination of people at planned meetings and marketed meetings face-to-face. They're applying that budget and energy to virtual. So everything's looking better. I mean, they're just designed better. They're actually, really great art on the screen. And where I've been, arguing for many years for people to get away from just icons, system icons, and this and that, we're seeing just an advancement of what people are putting into these virtual meetings. And essentially, for those of us that are on or in online learning, this is what we're doing. We're learning and we're online. So I'm hoping this all transfers, and our on-demand or our hybrids going forward are going to be just that much better. And people are going, wow, we can do this in a hybrid fashion and use our different platforms. So I'm very excited about the advancement of our craft because of this. So moving forward, who am I? Should take a drink of water. So just came out with my latest book. We'll talk about the link to this book later in this presentation. So what is this about? Well, it's specific to the association space, the nonprofit space, and it's about harvesting the knowledge, expertise of our members to build better content, right? And I interviewed, my co-author and I interviewed some 10 different association education experts, and really tried to get at how they do it. So I'm going to try to share a little bit of that. I'm also hoping you download the book and read further. Okay, so as many of you know, WebCourseWorks is in the business of learning platforms, and now we have a virtual event platform called Conference Now. One of the things we hear a lot of after the RFP process is, oh, we got to build content. Oh, we need to invest in content. So this cartoon really depicts a lot of what we see with associations, in that they just don't give content the budget and effort it deserves. Now, again, as I mentioned, I'm hoping that's going to change. So in this session, we're going to have some takeaways. And again, I hope it's a little interactive. Maybe use the chat or open up your mic. Some of the session's takeaway is that we're going to talk a little bit about my model, how to engage experts. We're going to talk about stories. And when it comes to the model, as you can see here with these check marks, that we're talking controlling the power structure of the relationships between you and the other people or the members, your member experts, making sure that you have process or project management, understanding shared language. I'll get into that a little bit with some examples. And then user testing, which is all about what I call formative improvement, and then being aware of the momentum of the project. So the first thing I'm going to just kind of chat about, and I hope I'll have some pauses here when I'm done on this to get you to share. I know Brenda mentioned she was in video, so she'll understand very well the power of role playing, the power of allowing people to see other people in the situation, in the same situation where you're trying to teach something. So for example, if you're interviewing someone, what are good interviewing techniques? And one of the things that we have today is we have the ability to do low-cost short sims. I'm a big fan and friend of Clark Aldridge, so I like to promote his site, shortsims.com. He's been a game-based learning expert and a simulation expert for most of the century. And he has written prolifically about this subject. But what he's done now is he's going, I can't get these clients to do expensive games or simulations. So he's really into the short sim using authoring systems like Branch Track and Spring Ahead. Not Spring Ahead, iSpring, excuse me. iSpring is, again, it's like PowerPoint Converter. It's fairly inexpensive, but it allows you to build branching stories. And the key to this is that you're putting your learners in a real life situation and making decisions. So I think it's better than video, because video, it's, people are just absorbing the video. So now we have a chance to put them in a situation and ask them to make questions and, make decisions based on questions. So the reason I'm showing you this is that this is a sophisticated level of learning for those of you that know Bloom's taxonomy and know that we need to get beyond comprehension, beyond just facts, beyond the didactic lecture like I'm doing today. Get beyond those things and get to the point where learners are actually making decisions and using higher level thinking skills. So I'm going to pause for a second, let anybody comment on this, whether you're into this or whether you view this as a quality learning experience.
I'd just be curious to know if anyone is using this that's here today.
Great question. Anybody considering it? How about that, Brenda?
This is Ash. We're definitely looking at trying to create more interactive video stuff. So we started moving towards including more, but again, it's the passive, straight consumption of video. And so we're looking at, little quiz, stop points, or sort of next step beyond that would be this sort of like branching, interactive, scenario-based video work.
Right. Good.
The company that one of the companies that I've done work for we've done branching things with video.
Great, great. So you understand the power of that, and that it's sophisticated learning activities versus just a lecture. And I think too, this whole virtual event phenomenon has improved our ability to do this kind of interactive discussion like we're having today. So even the chat alongside a recorded lecture is better than just the recorded lecture. So one of my case studies was from the American College of Chest Physicians. A really fantastic instructional designer and innovator is Chad Jackson. And Chad has been a leader in building simulations, and they're still very focused on the place-based event. Okay, so that when they have their annual meeting and they have the chest physicians coming in, they do these live interactive sets. And in this case, he worked with his subject matter experts to build an escape room. And I'm using this as an example because what we're going to talk about in terms of my model applies to face-to-face when you get into the situation where you're working with physicians or veterinarians and or other experts, and you're trying to build a really interesting activity or learning activity for a live session. And so he built an escape room, and of course it was very popular. This was last fall. He really understands his story in the book. He really kind of goes through how he works with experts and how his experts really inspire the team to go beyond the lecture and get into, real engaging and active and fun, in their case, fun. Here's a picture of some of the things that they did. So you get an idea. They built robots, they have these dummies, and then they're presenting the physician with challenges, right? And they have to solve those challenges in each station to get to the escape room. And so, death is possible in the escape room. So it's just an engaging kind of experience that it allows physicians to learn new things, usually cutting edge, state-of-the-art things in a fun way. So that's a really good example of, again, the kind of higher level thinking skills that we want to get to, and that my model helps you get to. So the first step in this whole process is getting inside the expert's head, right? So many of us are not experts. We're instructional designers. Even those of us that are experts may not be as expert as some of our rock stars in our groups. So the idea is, how do we get our rock stars and our volunteers to help contribute to build these interactive experiences? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So besides Clark Aldridge, excuse me, besides Clark Aldridge, one of the people that have influenced me is Gary Klein, and Gary was made famous by Malcolm Gladwell's book called Blink. So Malcolm really likes Gary's work. Gary's written many books, and Gary studied, firefighters. He studied a lot of military situations where people are in these high pressure situations. They need to make decisions, and how is that done? I mean, in other words, like, how does a firefighter that goes into a space, how do they intuitively know, that the floor might be giving out and, under them and such? And so he really he called it intuition. What I call it is tacit knowledge. So if you have tacit knowledge and you have explicit knowledge, explicit knowledge is what you can Google, and you can, see the definitions. We're all after knowledge. What is this? And the tacit knowledge is what makes experts experts. And in other words, it's based on their experience, and ultimately that experience, in Gary's terminology, becomes an intuition. I like to call it tacit because I think it's a category that, as designers, we can sort of mine. We can get in there and go, let's get this tacit knowledge, because we've got to make this you know, this simulation or this branching story. And in order to make it something beyond trite, we need to get at the stuff that it is taking people years to understand. Things like, you know, how do they read a room? You know, like how does a leader read a room, read a person? I mean, yes, there is explicit information on that, but many, many times very successful people have this intuitively. So Gary Klein's work is very interesting and has provided us with really studies on this thing I call tacit knowledge. So again, just to repeat myself, explicit knowledge is, you know, what we can read, what we can learn in a lecture, but when it comes to practicing it, these experts are aware of the situation, they're aware of the nuances of things, and they're making judgments based on their experience. Just one of the things when we interview experts that we want to immediately do, and this is something Gary Klein talks a lot about, is create a timeline. So that when we ask really good questions, like, tell me what can go wrong, give me an example, you're basing it on a timeline. So it is situational. This is a timeline of George Floyd's death, but it does give you the ability to zero in on what was the situation at a specific time and will help you understand the decision-making process of your experts. So let's talk a little more about engaging experts. But before I do, I'd like to open up the room here for some just different discussions about maybe your experience with experts and your experience with interviewing experts. You know, I'd like to do a little crowdsourcing here. Give me what you think are really good questions when you do get an opportunity to interview an expert.
This is Ash again. One of the things I like is just a simple, like, what are the 3 most important aspects of this topic? Because right there, as the expert, they could go super deep on 1,000 different angles and nuances and into the weeds. It's to trying to set that boundary up front to be like, just pick the highlights, and that can be sort of where we can set some boundaries around where the rest of this conversation can go.
Good.
I think it really depends on who your audience is. It really depends on a lot of different things. For me, what questions I might ask someone in an interview, which I often do for the videos. You know, we might just interview someone on camera and use that as part of the education. So there are lots of questions you can ask, but it really, you have to think about what is your messaging and who is your audience and some other elements like that. So it really just depends on, you know, what the point or of the education is, or what the purpose is.
Right. So even the concept of, even the art of asking questions is contextual, situational. Yeah. That's good. And I think too, one of the things to think about again is how do you get the expert to talk about that tacit knowledge, about the things that's based on experience within a given context. There were some people that were raising their hands. Just speak up, please. Okay. Anything in the chat, Odessa?
No.
Okay.
Chat's been pretty quiet.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I hope you don't mind my teacher pauses, but I know sometimes it takes people a little time to get that mic on, etc. So let's go into my 5 factors a little bit, and then we can maybe share some ways that you do this. So before I do that, I just want to talk about one of the stories in the book is Eric Peterson. If you know him, you can certainly chime in here, but he's with the American Academy of Physician Assistants. You know, as you probably know, there's hundreds of thousands of PAs that belong to this association. and they do a lot of training and a lot of specialization training. So Eric's involved in working with their member experts, and he has a great deal of experience. And what's unique about his setup, let me just kind of lay out the context here, is that he works with a team. So some of us wear all these different hats, right? We do everything. But in his case, he has medical writers that are working with him, so that once they get the information from the physician's assistants or physicians, they have a medical writer help craft that lesson and that learning experience. And he works with outside graphic artists. He has a team internally as well. So he's really a grand conductor as they create content. And his story is really interesting because he really is applying all of my 5 factors. So let me go into them real quick. So one of the factors is the power structure. And for those of you that maybe have worked in higher education and worked with professors, you know that there's this sort of hierarchy and there's a power structure in the way they might treat you. Same thing with rock stars, those that have written the books. So something to keep in mind. We'll just kind of talk through some tips on how to level that power structure playing field. The next one's process, which is project management. And I think all I have to say about that is if you're dealing with a rock star, you're dealing with a subject matter expert, and they know you're really together in terms of your management, and you're conducting meetings where you're not repeating things, they're going to get more engaged because they know that you're respecting their time. Communication, shared language. I think the bottom line for this one is, do you spend some time communicating your profession as an instructional designer, or what you know in terms of developing content? And this might be just talking about, the sage on the stage versus the guide on the side, to move them a little bit away from the lecture. Talk more about that in a bit. Improvement, again, we talk about formative improvement versus summative improvement. And the key here is that we all do summative. We all do the smiley sheet. Maybe we do a debrief after it's all done. But how many of you actually budget for improvements after user testing? So it's while you're developing the educational activity, you get feedback, and then you redo it. The other thing too, I recommend highly is to have the person that's funding it, which I would call the sponsor, have them be aware that this is an iteration. This is version 1, and we're going to test it in the marketplace and then expect to reinvest. That's an important concept. So the last one is momentum, and I'll go into that in a little bit. It's what it is. It's like, how do we keep people fired up about the project? AVMA, I know there's a veterinarian person in the attendees here, and you may know Deb Stone. And Deb is a very high energy developer of digital products and a leader within the space of online education. And she's an expert herself, right, which helps. But she also has a way of getting the team together. She right up front, she's using video conferencing. This is, of course, before Zoom fatigue, and really trying to get, using techniques to get people engaged in like my 5 factors. So it's a good story. She has a lot of good tips. And one of her big themes is trust, is getting the subject matter experts to trust you. Okay, so let's just open the mics up here a little bit and talk about ways that we can level the power relationship with these rock stars or professor, whatever. And I think my question to you is, how do you exhibit to them that you are a professional as well?
Well, for me, as a producer, it's about making the other person comfortable. I guess I don't typically try to necessarily make them know that I'm a professional. I just act professionally and interact with them, I'm curious to hear their story. But I certainly make sure that I have some information about their subject matter so that I can talk to them about it. And they know that I'm tracking with them. I'm not the expert like they are, but I know enough to be curious. And when they say things, I can have questions, follow-up questions to whatever it is, to the answers that they're giving me, but still keep them on track to give me the information that I need to tell whatever the story is that we're trying to tell.
Excellent.
Hi, this is Julie. I'm from American Medical Technologists. I'm an instructional designer there. And I think, to Brenda's point, that I try to analyze the person I'm working with, because different SMEs work differently. So, certain people, it's all about the, time, and certain people, it's a more of a personal approach. So I try to analyze who I'm working with and then tailor my approach to their personality and what works best with them.
Excellent. Anybody see the value in, maybe credentialing? In other words, like some people, and again, this is contextual, like Julie's talking about, but some people respect the CAE certification. There may be some other e-learning or educational certifications. Anybody feel that that's a good way to communicate?
Hi, this is Marcia Tomaselli. I'm the Director of Education at the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. I've held various certifications in the past, and I think unless the subject matter experts you're dealing with understand those certifications, it doesn't get you anywhere with them. I work with physicians mostly, who I have a history of being difficult. But what I try to do is just be respectful of their time. And, most of the physicians we work with are volunteers. They're not getting a stipend, or they're not getting paid for what they're doing. So I try to be respectful of their time and take on those tasks that really fall more within my purview as an educator and as a staff person at the Journal, so that they don't have to be bogged down by those details, so that I can get to the heart of the matter, which is their content expertise and knowledge.
Excellent. One of the things that Eric Peterson talked about in the interview was that he actually does some reading on the subject matter. He deals with a lot of different specialties, physicians and such, and he likes to read up just so that he can demonstrate that he cares a little more about the subject, or can communicate, knows the vocabulary. So he does a lot of pre-study. The other thing that I've seen that works very successfully is to have your kind of toolkit of examples of best practice. So one of the projects I studied for my PhD was a chirogenic lab that this professor wanted to build, online lab, right? And so what the instructional designers did to sort of brainstorm was, they said, well, how do we make this thing creative? How do we gamify it? And so they actually looked at games that might give them some motivation or ideas. This was early on in the gamification movement, and it worked really well. And then the other thing too is just the design of something as simple as the menu structure of an online course, for example. It's good to come to the subject matter experts, if you have a committee or whatever, with examples, images, to show them, this is what we're thinking this is going to look like. Show them examples of what maybe other people have done online. Is this something that any of you do in terms of having your sort of best practice toolkit?
This is Erico, and I feel like something similar to that. I try to provide as much structure as possible. So when we have a vision for, a particular educational product, we want to create an infrastructure in which they can kind of just plug in their expertise, so that they're not kind of coming up with everything from the ground up. And the easier it is for them as professionals and as people who have a full-time job, the more invested they are in the project.
Great point.
This is Julie again. To Erico's point about
Yeah.
being structured, I think you have to set expectations from the start. This is what we're going to ask you to do, and this is what we will do, so that it's very clear who's responsible for what, and then that's
Right.
kind of also setting up yourself as the education professional.
Perfect. I like that a lot. One of the things too that I've seen done is to have, besides what you just said in terms of demonstrating yourself that, you're a professional, you've done this before by the structure. I've also seen where they spent just a little bit of time on talking about the lecture versus active learning. And some people have used Bloom's taxonomy or a derivative of Bloom's to help with that instruction. Now, I know a lot of people understand active learning, particularly in the medical profession, because we've had problem-based learning for many, many years, and medical professions understand the value of an apprenticeship, et cetera. But it still is helpful to say, we really want to get beyond this lecture format and put more active learning in. And online learning, is really at an early state right now. And I think, we will eventually get to that point where we do get beyond the lecture. So that's power structure. It's about coming up with ways that says you're a professional too. And I think you've come up, the group here has talked about some great ideas there. One of the things that I talk about in the Experts Halo book is some of the things that we do at WebCourseWorks, and some of the things that we try to expect out of our implementers or our project managers. And some of it's just like, okay, we use a team site. I'll show you a picture of it. So we used to have Project Team, now we have Basecamp. There's many different sites that you can use. They're not that expensive. But again, it says to your committee of experts, we're going to be organized. We're not going to use email. We're going to send everything through the team site so that things don't get lost, and everybody holds everybody else accountable. And that really comes down to effective project management, which is really what you were just saying, is that you provide structure. And somebody mentioned the idea that, what's expected of each. I love that, where you set the roles and what you're going to do and what they're going to do. I know that many of you, get frustrated because many experts, don't meet their deadlines or their commitments because they're overcommitted. But maybe there's some ideas out there. Let's just informally talk about some ideas on how do you get your experts to get their work in on time?
This is Becca Orr from the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. We've instituted a hierarchy of our experts. So we have for each topic, we have a section head, and then they choose and recruit their authors underneath them. And so generally they're people that they work with, and
peer pressure,
exactly.
Right? That's
exactly.
great.
So
yep.
If I can't get them to, if they're not responding to emails, we give them, the benefit of the doubt. And then at a certain point, we kind of start tattling.
Yeah, no, that's great. Eric Peterson in our interview said that he will actually chat somebody that he knows in the group and say, could you please give that other person a nudge? And it usually works because the peers are going to have much more impact than maybe you would have in bothering them or nudging them. Let's say that.
This is Julie. I would also say not to give too long of a time frame for them to get something done, because they're not doing it until the day or two before anyways.
Right.
And so always building in buffers for, okay, you have 2 weeks to do this,
Right.
and then know yourself, okay, I got to add a week to my schedule for it. And then
Yes.
when they finally get to it the day before, and then you're like, okay, you know what, I can give you a couple more days.
Yeah, that's great. Building that time in and understanding that they're going to be last minute. So that's great. Any other comments on this? Great. How many? Has anybody used Basecamp or a project management website to help them?
We use Asana.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just one of many project
Yes.
management tools out there.
Yeah. It's a discipline. A lot of people they just want to use email, and it really does take some nudging to get them to post on a site. But as those of you that had to corral a lot of the emails, it's much better to have one site. And then if it is a short duration, it's kind of nice that everybody's getting an email every week to remind them of their to-dos. Okay, another interview we did with Suzanne Hill, and she has a good story about how she gets good collaboration going, and one of the things that I like is being upfront about a shared language. So if you're a trained instructional designer, or if you just understand some of the techniques, whether it's establishing learning objectives up front, or again, moving them to sort of share that tacit knowledge, and you incorporating interviews and such, and explain to them what you're doing. I think it's good to spend a little time on talking about what you do as an expert in the field of developing these materials. A lot of times it's acronyms, as you all know, getting those together. So anybody have any kind of tool in their toolkit that really kind of tries to demonstrate some of the higher level thinking skills that you want to achieve with your active learning projects? Okay, I'm going to move forward. Yep, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious, do you mean developing a shared language with the subject matter experts?
Yeah, I mean, let's say, this is Brenda, right? So
correct.
Yeah, so like if you're doing a video and you're doing some role playing, for example, you're probably going to have some of your own vocabulary that you're going to want to share at some point, or I've seen where somebody, you don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I understand that, but where they have a very a checklist of, here's my vocabulary as a designer, as a video producer. If you hear me saying, this acronym or whatever, this is what I mean by it. So I think again, it's really moving the experts to understand where you're going, where you're trying to do, again, a more complicated learning activity. You're trying to get beyond just the lecture. You're looking at them for ideas. It's like Chad Jackson in the escape room, right? He's engaged these chess physicians in coming up with creative ways to teach innovative new concepts through modeling, through an experience, through a game. Okay, so how many of you use user testing as a part of your process? Like, you literally will say, we're going to go into user testing, and then we're going to do a little quick evaluation here to improve our product. I know it takes more time, but how many of you have used it?
We've done it to a small extent, probably not as big as we should, but definitely before we launch it, there's, about 10 extra hands that look at it or eyes that look at it.
Good.
We use, it's more of like a QA process, and then it sort of oozes over a tiny bit into user testing, and you know, where it's usually just looking for issues, but sometimes we'll say like, that question seems a bit confusing, or maybe this activity can be a little different.
Right.
But I'd say probably 80% Q&A, 20% like user testing perspective.
And a lot of people use peer reviews in the sense that they kind of set it up where they're actually, you know, I know a lot of medical groups, you know, their question bank for their exams is like it's everything. And so the idea of having, you know, various physicians reviewing other physicians' kind of questions is a process that many use, and it is a form of user testing. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have when we build a new feature or we're doing something special. Whether it's special PARS reporting or any other kind of computerized feature, you know, we want to find out during development, and it's really hard to get people to take testing seriously. You know, some people don't like to sign off, for example, that they've actually even done it. So it is a challenge. And does anybody have any creative ways they get their groups to test out?
For if we're launching like a new type of product, we will do a pilot test, and we will basically give, you know, we'll get a group of members to test it. They'll get the CEs for doing it, and then they'll also get a lovely AMT gift item to go along with it.
Oh, that's very nice. I like that. I like the gift. That's great for test. That's a really good idea. Yeah, I think like I like the idea for when it comes to project management of building in that time, knowing how SMEs are going to wait till the last minute. So finding creative ways or rewards for getting them to actually engage and test something is just really important. And it's a challenge for us. It really is, because people are busy and they don't really want to go into it. But I like what you're saying. You know, piloting is part of your vocabulary. It's part of your process. So you know, which is essentially formative testing because it's before the project is done. Now, again, as I mentioned, I like the idea of literally getting the sponsor to budget for phase 2. So everybody, you've created these expectations that, okay, we may not hit exactly the most beautiful course that we expected to make, but we know we're going to have another iteration. So that takes a little art, of course, an art to get people convinced to do that, but I highly recommend it. Any other comments on creative ways of testing what you're doing?
Yeah, this is Marcia Tomaselli again. Most of our online learning products are assessment based, and they're based on articles published in our journal. And so the authors submit questions with their manuscript, and they're not always the best questions. You know, they're so enmeshed in the content, they sometimes don't see the forest for the trees. So we instituted, it's a peer review process where we have other physicians review the questions, CME questions, assessment questions, and what again, it's a volunteer. So they get actually sort of a title. They're associate CME editors, and they get recognition on the journal Masthead Online.
Nice. I love the recognition idea. And
yeah, they seem to like it because they can put it on their CVs.
Yes, I think that's excellent. The other thing, and I'm sure you use this, but technology is often able to do an item analysis. And what I mean by item analysis is it basically will flag assessment questions that people are getting wrong that are smart. In other words, your best test takers are getting this question wrong, so it flags it, so you know there's really something wrong with the way this question is written. So you can use technology to do item analysis. Anybody doing that, item analysis?
We do a little bit of it, but
Yeah.
it's particularly after the fact. It's not a part of the process where we're getting the
Yeah.
product
Okay.
ready.
Okay. Well, if those of you that are attending, if you're customers of WebCourseWorks, you should certainly be asking your account manager about item analysis, because it is something that is a good way to spot questions that may not be written as well as they could be. Okay, so the last part of my model is momentum, and this is where I'm really looking for your input because it really has to be creative. Now I know that you mentioned awards, sending them a gift, giving them recognition, love it. And that can be done to help momentum as well. So one of the things that I repeat a lot about when I talk about momentum is to come up with a spiking momentum timeline. And where do you think you can get people excited? And the simplest one, of course, is really good at screen art. Like, this is how it's going to look, and it's just a JPEG, but it can get people really excited. Any ideas out there on how you spike momentum? In other words, getting people fired up.
I try to tap into whatever already fires them up, whatever their passion is. As far as interviews go, of course, I'm not like most people on this panel where I'm part of the entire, or I oversee the education process. I'm usually one of the people they oversee. But when I'm interviewing or I'm creating a video, it's, whoever it is that's sort of my contact for that, or that expert. I find out what they are, and it usually just shows if you listen. What are they passionate about? What is the thing that's really getting them going? What are they, or the people who interact with those who are going to take the course? What feedback do you get from them? What do they like? What do they don't? What they don't like? Case studies, physicians love case studies. So, and it's just storytelling in general. It's just the basics of storytelling, but it applies to anything, even something as seemingly mundane as a CME.
Right, like I'm sure you've done prototypes where you've done, edited a few video clips together to get people excited. Well, this was really, this is what we're going after. I've seen prototypes of, computer, interactive computer type questionnaires and such. I think another good one is, and you've inspired me here, is maybe making a game out of case studies of storytelling, where maybe that's part of the brainstorming session where you seed it with a good story, and then you try to get others to contribute other stories to fire up the group.
Well, as you were talking about screen art, you can always use storyboards or whatever any kind of visuals to show the big picture. But with CMEs, it's in healthcare, it can be tricky because they have a lot of rules. You can't just make up information. You have to. A lot of this is clinically based, so the storytelling can be really tricky. It's something I've had to learn to do over the years I've been doing this. It can be tricky.
Right, for sure. The thing though, I love your storyboard idea, and when it comes to these freelance sites and stuff, you can get somebody to do some graphics and art for you pretty inexpensively today, and it's a step you might want to consider if you're not using storyboards or art to demonstrate what you're trying to do and get people excited. The testing process itself can be motivational. We built a large program earlier in this century for the World Anti-Doping Agency, and it was where we were into Flash games during the days of Flash, and it was worldwide, and it was for elite youth athletes, right, to understand the whole doping situation before they became Olympic athletes. And we tested it in Africa, and we tested it on site, but I mean, the subject matter experts got so excited, watching some of that video of people testing, where they really saw their creation come to life, and they saw how the learner reacted. So that can be motivational. Any other comments on this? I know we're running out of time here. Odessa, how much time do we have left?
You have about 5 minutes, John.
Oh, okay. So let's just wrap it up then. Any other final comments on momentum? You know, how you get your subject matter experts engaged?
We've definitely just used checklists, and with our subject matter experts, being type A, physician, personality, not just checklists, but also like color coding, like here's the roadmap of where you're going, here's where you are currently.
Nice.
And I think because it shows forward movement, it allows them, you know, that little bit of extra boost to continue going.
Right, and that's a good example of knowing your subject matter experts. They're going to like checklists. They like the color code, you know, the pathway. Excellent idea.
I have a question back to project management.
Sure.
When you use software programs, do you find that you have a large learning curve for the technology?
You know, we haven't with Basecamp. And because we're, you know, we used to use literally we used to use our learning management system platform as the team site. And so they had to learn it anyway at some point. So it was a good kind of process. So I'm not saying that people don't have trouble with tech, right? As we get all these calls about how do I log in? I lost my password. But really, so it's a really good point. We have not had as much pushback on like a Basecamp, and really I think during this COVID period, where more and more people are getting used to technology and working online. So I think that's another positive thing. But you're true. You're gonna have some people that just don't have the time to, or don't want another password, right? They're like, I don't want to have to log into something else. So yeah, you're going to get pushback. But on the other hand, you know, there's certain requirements and protocols that help you do your job. And we use it too as a vendor for accountability. It's an audit trail, who submitted it when, why things were delayed. So it's a kind of a nice sort of, you know, something to cover yourself with if you have that record. So it's worth demanding that they do it, in my opinion.
And Julie, I've had clients that I've done small videos for their LMS or other technology that they feel their physicians might not be able to navigate on their own. It's easy to do a really inexpensive video. Even in-house, most people have the capabilities to do a really shorty to just give them the basics so that they don't have to go through the help section to learn it themselves.
Right. Are you talking about like the screener tools, the tour, in the technology itself?
Yeah, it's easy to make a very simple video to show someone,
Right.
you know, how to navigate software.
Right. Any other final questions? I know we're running out of time. We have a few minutes left. My book is on Amazon. So if you're interested in reading about these stories, or you have somebody that's learning how to work with experts that you want to kind of throw them in the water and say, read this. Want to thank you for sharing today. I think it was definitely a group crowdsource. So thank you very much for contributing.
Yeah, just final announcements, John. So we will send out a link to all the attendees for the recording of this webinar and for the slides. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if there are no other questions, we have like 1 more minute left.
Great. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.